Welcome to the History Maps podcast. If you look at the landscape of present-day central Thailand, especially, from an aerial perspective, when the wet season starts to flood the Chao Phraya Valley,
Mm.
you start to notice these really distinct, irregular concentric circles etched right into the earth.
Hmm.
There are over 100 of them, just spanning across the western Menam valleys. They look almost like giant earthen fingerprints.
Right, yeah.
And these are not natural formations at all. They are the remnants of moats and earthworks, basically the physical footprints of the Dvaravati.
Yeah, and those footprints represent one of the most complex, decentralized, and really enduring cultural networks in early Southeast Asia.
Right.
We're looking at a system of early historic polities that thrived from the 6th to the 11th century. But to fully grasp what the Dvaravati was, we kind of have to discard the traditional expectation of a single unified empire.
Yeah, there's no rigid list of emperors or,
Mm.
clearly demarcated borders here.
Exactly. It's much more fluid than that.
Which is why we're doing this, right? That is our mission for this deep dive into our Southeast Asian history series. We are going to navigate through this incredibly intricate web of moated cities, Mon culture, and fierce regional rivalries that shaped the region long before the modern states we recognize today even existed.
It's a tangled web for sure.
Definitely. And we're pulling from a variety of distinct sources to reconstruct this for you. So we've got archaeological records pulled straight from the dirt, highly formalized Chinese dynastic histories, and then the sweeping narratives of local chronicles.
And the challenge, and really the fascination, is that these sources operate on, well, completely different frequencies.
Right.
The tangible archaeology gives us the foundations of stupas and silver coins, but then the local legends provide us with these grand, culturally significant narratives of, migrations and divine lineages.
Yeah.
And then the Chinese records, specifically from the Tang Dynasty, well, they attempt to categorize this fluid network into their own rigid bureaucratic spreadsheets.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer scale of the historical timeline we're dealing with here requires us to look way, way back. You don't just wake up one day in the 6th century and decide to dig over 100 moated urban centers.
No, you certainly don't.
This requires an immense foundation of continuous development spanning over a millennium.
Exactly. To understand the golden age of Dvaravati, we really have to start with what archaeologists classify as the Proto-Dvaravati phase,
Okay.
which spans roughly from the 1st to the 5th centuries. Geographically, we are situating ourselves in the western Menam valleys. This specific landscape is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
You have early settlements like the unmoated site of Pongtuk, and moving slightly later, the deeply significant moated city of Mueng Uthong.
Right, and the human occupation in this specific region has deep roots. It goes back to at least 1000 BCE. That places us right in the thick of the Neolithic period.
Yeah.
So what does the evidence from that era actually show us about how these people were living?
Well, at 1000 BCE, you were looking at small, very localized communities that were heavily dependent on the immediate environment. It's agrarian, focused on basic subsistence and localized trade of stone tools and early ceramics.
Right.
But as we transition from the Neolithic into the Bronze and Iron Ages, the material culture found in the stratigraphy begins to shift quite dramatically.
Yeah, things pick up.
They do. By around 200 BCE, the sheer volume and the type of artifacts just change completely.
We're talking about the emergence of maritime trade networks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the archaeological record shows them linking up with present-day Taiwan, the Philippines, and Vietnam.
Yes, and that implies a significant leap in technology and social organization. I mean, to participate in maritime exchange across the South China Sea, you need a solid understanding of the monsoon wind patterns.
You need seaworthy vessels.
Exactly. And you need surplus goods to trade, which means your agriculture has to be producing more than you strictly need just to survive.
So by 200 BCE, these communities in the western Menam valleys are already plugging into a much larger grid. They're not isolated. And as we push forward into the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, that grid expands exponentially.
Oh, yeah.
The archaeological evidence shows them engaging in direct trade with Funan, which was this early dominant polity centered in the Mekong Delta. But it even goes further than that, right? They're trading with South Asia and China.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this economic prosperity derived from maritime trade is the fundamental catalyst for urbanization.
Right.
We have these early nodes, settlements identified in various texts as Chinlin in the Western Plains and Tuyuan to the east. At this early stage, they are operating largely independently of one another.
Essentially, they're prosperous trading outposts.
Right. And wealth changes everything. When a settlement like Pontook becomes a crucial node for goods moving between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, wealth accumulates.
And that wealth allows for population growth.
Precisely. A larger population requires more complex societal organization just to manage resources, settle disputes, and defend the accumulated wealth. This economic engine lays the absolute groundwork for the complex societies that will eventually synthesize into a cohesive cultural identity.
But, while the physical artifacts, the beads, the pottery sherds, the early metalwork, while they tell us an economic story, the local chronicles offer a completely different lens.
They really do.
Let's examine the Taiyuan's legend of Singanavati. According to this tradition, before the Dvaravati period took hold, the lower Menam Basin was known as Lavarashtra.
Which translates to the land of the Lawa people.
Okay.
The chronicles describe deep, ongoing interactions between the Taiyuan and these Lawa groups. It's not always a narrative of conquest either. It is often a narrative of integration.
Right. There's a specific account regarding the third monarch of Yanok, a ruler named Achucharaj.
Yeah.
The legend states he took a princess of the Lawa of Doitung as his principal queen consort, and their offspring succeeded to the Yanok throne.
It's a clear record of dynastic intermarriage, which was a standard way of cementing political alliances through bloodlines.
But there's another part of this chronicle that I really want to dig into because it highlights the friction between legend and logistics. The narrative describes a mass migration occurring in 444.
Ah, yes.
A ruler named Chayasiri supposedly faced an invasion by the Mon kingdom of Vatan. To escape, he is said to have led 100,000 households in a southward migration into the upper Chao Phraya River basin, eventually founding a settlement at present-day Kamphaen Phet.
It's a staggering demographic claim.
Right, and let's just do the math on that.
Yeah.
100,000 households. If we assume a conservative estimate of 5 people per household, that is 500,000 people.
Yeah.
In the year 444, mobilizing 500,000 civilians, feeding them, and moving them across hundreds of miles of dense, unpaved terrain while fleeing an invading army. I mean, the logistics are frankly impossible.
Yeah, right.
You look at modern military operations or refugee crises with motorized transport, and moving 500,000 people is an unparalleled logistical nightmare.
Your skepticism is entirely warranted. This is where we have to critically evaluate our sources, right?
Yeah.
There is no demonstrable empirical relationship between these sweeping narrative accounts of vast migrations and the earliest epigraphic evidence we can pull from the ground. The archaeology simply does not support a sudden, singular influx of 500,000 people into Kamphaen Phet in the 5th century.
So why write it down? If it's not a literal demographic census, what is the purpose of the 100,000 household claim?
We have to view these chronicles not as objective historical textbooks, but as political charters. The number is hyperbolic. It's meant to convey the immense prestige and power of Chayasiri and his lineage.
Oh, I see.
It establishes a narrative of a sweeping, unified origin for the people of that region. It provides cultural cohesion, even if it contradicts the radiocarbon dates and the stone inscriptions. For instance, the earliest written attestation of the term Siam doesn't appear until a Funan inscription from 611.
Right.
The chronicles operate on a frequency of cultural truth, while the epigraphy operates on historical chronology.
It's like trying to trace a single origin story through these sources is akin to untangling a severely knotted fishing line.
That's a good way to put it.
You have multiple distinct threads: the local legends of migrations, the hard epigraphy carved into stone, the economic data from the dirt, and the formalized Chinese records. They don't perfectly align. You pull on the chronicle thread thinking it explains a population shift, and it completely contradicts the archaeological thread.
And that tension is exactly why early Southeast Asian history requires such careful navigation. Take the Chinese sources from the late 6th to early 7th century, for example. Texts like the Tang Huiyao and the Sifu Yonggui describe an independent polity they call Duomi. The bureaucrats note that it was not territorially extensive, but it had a relatively large population and bordered the western edge of Tuyuan, which was likely centered at either modern Lopburi or Sima Hosat.
So the Chinese records are trying to map a fluid, decentralized reality.
Right.
We have these prosperous trading outposts, these rich legends of integration and migration, and these distinct regional nodes identified by foreign powers. But as we transitioned into the 6th century, That is when the Dvaravati cultural identity truly crystallizes.
It crystallizes physically and undeniably in the landscape. This brings us to the golden age of the moated cities, spanning from the 6th to the 9th centuries.
Mhm.
The absolute hallmark of a Dvaravati settlement is the moated urban center. Archaeologists have systematically identified 107 of these sites distributed across present-day Thailand.
107 moated cities. Let's talk about why a city builds a moat, because it's not just for keeping enemies out.
Mm.
In the context of the Chao Phraya Valley, the environment really dictates the architecture.
That is a critical point. When we hear moat, we often default to the European medieval concept, of a defensive trench filled with water to stop siege engines.
Right, knights and castles.
Exactly. But while defense was certainly a factor, the primary function of these Dvaravati earthworks was deeply tied to water management. The region operates on a strict monsoon cycle. You have months of torrential, flooding rains, followed by months of severe dry season.
So the moat acts as a reservoir.
Exactly. The irregular concentric earthworks and moats were designed to retain water during the dry months for agriculture and just daily survival. And they simultaneously acted as flood mitigation during the monsoon.
That's incredibly practical.
It is. And furthermore, there's a strong cosmological element to it. In Hindu-Buddhist urban planning, a moat physically represents the cosmic ocean surrounding Mount Meru, the center of the universe.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's really notable.
Yeah, so the moat is practical infrastructure, military defense, and a spiritual boundary all at once.
The scale of engineering required to excavate 107 of these systems is profound. And within this network, certain major centers emerged as super-regional powers. Places like Nakhon Pathom, Suphanburi, and Saithep.
Right.
They shared specific architectural hallmarks, particularly in their religious monuments, which we will explore, and in their hydraulic engineering. But before we get to the art, we need to address the name itself, Dvaravati. It has a very specific origin.
We don't derive the name from a king's decree or a foundational myth. We pull it straight from the silver coins excavated at these sites. These coins are inscribed in Sanskrit with the words Sri Dvaravati.
And what does that translate to in practical terms?
In Sanskrit, Dvaravati literally means that which has gates, or the gated one.
I find that fascinating. That which has gates. It implies fortification and security, yes, but gates are also meant to be opened. They are entry points for commerce, for diplomats, for monks. It perfectly encapsulates a society built on maritime and overland trade networks.
It does. And historically, the term Dvaravati is also associated with the mythical city of Krishna in Indian epic literature, which adds a layer of divine prestige to the name. For a long time, historians debated whether this vast network of 107 cities had a single dominant center, or if it was entirely peer-to-peer.
Right.
The silver coins were found widely distributed, which proved a shared economic standard, but it didn't pinpoint a capital.
But the archaeological landscape shifted in 2019 with a critical discovery in Nakhon Pathom province.
Yes, the Wat for Endam inscription. It's a stone inscription, securely dated to the 6th century based on its paleography. What makes it vital is that it explicitly references 3 regional cities. The linguistic context and the physical location of the find strongly suggest that Nakhon Pathom, where the stone was erected, likely functioned as the central hub or the most prestigious node of the Dvaravati network at that specific time.
But even if Nakhon Pathom was the most prestigious hub, we have to be very careful not to project modern concepts of statehood onto them.
Definitely.
When we look at the Tang Dynasty records from China, we see how foreign powers tried to make sense of this structure. The Tang bureaucrats described a 3-tier administrative system, which they translated into their own familiar terms as prefectures, counties, and districts.
The Chinese records note the presence of civil and military officials overseeing state affairs. They even document that the polity had 6 major markets or trading centers.
But this is where the Chinese lens distorts the reality, right? The Tang Dynasty was a highly centralized, rigidly hierarchical empire. They looked at Dvaravati and wrote down what they wanted to see. A neat chain of command.
Yeah.
But Dvaravati was not a single centralized state. There was no absolute emperor in Nakhon Pathom issuing decrees that a governor in Saithep had to follow.
Absolutely not. It was a loose conglomeration of Mon principalities. They were separate political entities, each with its own ruler, its own local elites, and its own internal politics.
So what tied them together?
What made them Dvaravati was a shared cultural, artistic, and religious sphere. They minted the same style of silver coins, they utilized the same architectural vocabulary, and they participated in the same overarching trade network.
Right.
It was a decentralized mandala system where power was based on prestige and relationships rather than hard territorial borders.
To really picture how these individual principalities operated on the world stage, let's look at a specific diplomatic exchange. Let's talk about their missions to the Chinese court. Chinese Buddhist accounts from the mid-7th century describe a kingdom they recorded as Tolopoti, which is their phonetic rendering of Dvaravati. Between 638 and 649, this kingdom dispatched multiple official embassies to the Tang court in Cheng'an.
Think about the logistics and the sheer ambition of that journey. You have envoys from Tolopotu embarking on a maritime voyage that would take months, navigating the South China Sea, surviving weather and piracy, just to reach the southern Chinese ports,
Yeah.
and then traveling overland to the immense cosmopolitan capital of the Tang dynasty.
And they aren't traveling empty-handed, they're bringing tribute. This would include exotic goods, highly prized in Chang'an, perhaps rare aromatics, local flora and fauna, intricate metalwork, or forest products from the Chao Phraya Basin.
Once in Chang, they had to navigate the highly formalized, meticulously choreographed rituals of the Tang court. They're communicating through layers of translators. The goal here is not submission, but recognition. By offering tribute, the envoys of Tolopoti are securing lucrative trade relationships and establishing political legitimacy. Being recognized by the Tang emperor elevates the prestige of the specific Dvaravati ruler who sent the mission, giving him an edge over his rival princes back home.
So what does this all mean? Why does a shared culture across decentralized principalities matter so much? Why build 107 cities that look the same if they aren't under one banner?
It's a great question.
It matters because it demonstrates a completely different mechanism of power. You don't need a single autocratic ruler with a standing army to create a dominant regional force.
By sharing an identity, by honoring the same artistic styles, utilizing the same religious texts, and trading with the same silver currency, these cities created a unified economic and cultural bloc.
It reduced friction in trade.
Exactly. A merchant from Uthong knew his silver Siri Dvaravati coin held value in Sithap. They were infinitely stronger together in the global maritime trade network than they ever could have been entirely alone.
But wealth and regional prominence inevitably attract external pressure. You build beautiful, prosperous gated cities, and your neighbors start looking at those gates.
Naturally.
This brings us to the geopolitical chess match of the era, the complex web of diplomacy, marriage, and warfare, particularly regarding the relationship between the Dvaravati centers and the expanding Chenla Empire to the east.
Chenla was a formidable power situated in what is now Cambodia, primarily around the Tonle Sap Basin and the Mekong Delta. And as they expanded, they naturally looked westward toward the fertile plains and lucrative trade routes of the Chao Phraya Basin.
We see evidence of deep political intertwining between these powers very early on. Let's examine the Ban Wang Pai inscription, discovered in Phetchabun province.
That's a key piece of evidence.
This stone is dated to 550. It explicitly references the enthronement of a Dvaravati ruler who is identified as the son of Prathavindravarman.
Prathavindravarman is a remarkably significant figure. He was the father of Bhavavarman I, who is widely considered a foundational monarch of the Chenla Empire.
Okay, wow. That's a major connection.
It is. So right there, carved into the epigraphic record in the year 550, you have indisputable documentation of profound dynastic connections between a Dvaravati center and the emerging power of Chenla.
They were intermarrying at the absolute highest levels of leadership.
Yeah.
A Dvaravati ruler is sharing bloodlines with the founders of Chenla.
It highlights how fluid the elite networks were. But as history shows us repeatedly, dynastic marriage does not guarantee perpetual peace.
True.
During the reign of Isanavarman I of Chenla, who ruled from 616 to 637, the geopolitical strategy shifted from alliance to aggressive expansion.
Isanavarman I attempted to forcibly extend Chenla's influence into the Menam Basin. The records indicate they specifically targeted the Tuyuan kingdom, which was a vital node within the Dvaravati sphere.
These incursions were significant military campaigns. Ancient Southeast Asian warfare was often less about conquering specific plots of land and more about controlling populations and securing trade routes.
You raid to capture artisans, farmers, and elites, bringing them back to bolster your own capital.
Exactly.
But what is revealing is how the conflict between Chenla and Tuyuan ended. It didn't result in total annihilation or complete annexation. Instead, the hostilities concluded with another dynastic marriage.
Right back to marriage.
Yeah, a princess of Chenla was married to a prince of Dvaravati. The offspring of this specific union, a ruler named Harshavarman, eventually became the ruler of Muing Uthon.
It is a textbook geopolitical resolution. You push your military advantage until you hit a logistical limit or a stalemate, and then you solidify the new borders by intertwining your royal houses. But the Dvaravati principalities were not solely occupied with defending against Chenla. They were frequently in conflict with each other.
The internal rivalry between the super-regional centers is a defining feature of the period. You have Nakhon Pathom in the west and Sethep in the east, constantly vying for supremacy. We see the memory of this preserved in local traditions, specifically the legend of Nakhon Chai.
This legend provides a narrative framework for a very real power struggle. It details a figure named Sithijaya. The tradition places him around 590, originating from a region often identified with Sethep.
Okay.
He relocates westward to the Nakhon Pathom region and comes into direct, violent conflict with the pre-existing ruler there, a man named Kakabhadra.
The struggle ends with Sithijaya achieving a total military victory, deposing Kakabhadra and establishing his own authority over the western center.
This raises an important question. How did these internal Dvaravati rivalries leave them vulnerable to or dependent on external alliances? If Nakhon Pathom and Sethep are locked in a perpetual struggle for regional hegemony, they naturally begin seeking external alliances to tip the scales.
Boy.
A prince in Sethep might invite Chenla forces in to help him defeat a rival in Nakhon Pathom. It is highly likely that these deep internal divisions are exactly what provided the leverage for empires like Chenla, and later a polity known as Win Dan, to exert continuous influence over the Dvaravati network.
It's the inherent flaw of the decentralized system. A divided house is easily manipulated. By the mid-7th century, we start to see the balance of power shift once again.
We do.
Around 665, a ruler associated with the Scythep region reportedly consolidated his authority over both Scythep and the Nakhon Pathom territories, briefly centralizing power.
And concurrently, we see the formal establishment of new strategic centers, most notably the Lavo Kingdom. According to the chronicles, around 629, a group of Brahmins departing from Nakhon Pathom received orders to establish a new settlement in what is now Lopburi.
The chronicles state the city was completed in 648, and a figure named Kalavarnadisharaja was enthroned as its inaugural ruler. And the lineage here is fascinating because Kalavarnadisharaja was reportedly the son of Kakabhadra, the ruler who had been defeated by Sithijaya decades earlier.
It shows the incredible resilience of these elite families. You lose your throne in one city, and a generation later, your son establishes a new kingdom nearby. What is truly striking about these ruling lineages across Dvaravati is their ethnic and cultural fluidity. We are analyzing royal houses that were constantly blending Mon, Thai, and Khmer ancestries through marriage and alliance.
The borders of identity were entirely permeable. You could have a ruler with a Mon father and a Khmer mother, employing Brahmin priests for state rituals, while ruling over a population with heavy Thai demographic influences. It was a cosmopolitan reality driven by the necessities of political survival and trade.
But while the kings and princes were maneuvering their armies, negotiating marriages, and vying for Tang recognition, something far more enduring was happening on the ground level.
Right.
A distinct cultural and religious renaissance was a blossoming one that would leave a legacy far outlasting any of these individual rulers.
And that transition takes us directly into the heart of Dvaravati daily life, their art, and their religious devotion. Because beneath the political turbulence of rival princes, this was a society experiencing a profound, localized golden age of creative expression.
The religious landscape of the Dvaravati period was incredibly rich and syncretic. Hinduism was certainly present and politically active, as evidenced by the Brahmin influences in the foundation of cities like Lavo and the presence of Hindu deities in early epigraphy. But Buddhism was the dominant unifying force across the network.
Dvaravati actually played a critical foundational role in embedding Buddhism, and specifically Buddhist art, into the wider region of Southeast Asia. When you study the artifacts recovered from these 107 cities, you are instantly struck by the stucco motifs.
Yeah, absolutely.
The artisans were working in a medium that allowed for incredible detail and expression.
Stucco, being a mixture of lime, sand, and water, is highly malleable before it sets.
Mm.
This allowed Dvaravati artisans to create intricate, deeply symbolic reliefs that adorned the exteriors of their brick stupas and religious monuments.
You frequently see classic Indianized motifs, Garudas, the mythical bird creatures, Makaras, the aquatic beasts, and Nagas, the multi-headed serpents.
But the artisans didn't just copy Indian templates, they localized them. They infused them with distinct Mon facial features and regional stylistic flourishes. However, the most iconic symbol of the Dvaravati era, the artifact that truly defines them archaeologically, is the Dharmakakra.
The Buddhist wheels of the law.
Yes, these are large, intricately carved stone wheels. In Buddhist doctrine, the wheel represents the Buddha's teaching and the setting in motion of the law of Dharma. The Dvaravati centers produce these wheels in abundance, often mounting them on tall stone pillars placed at the entrances of their cities or temple complexes.
Alongside the wheels, the archaeological record is filled with votive tablets, elaborate pottery, terracotta trays used in rituals, bronze chandeliers, and bells. But if you want a vivid, nearly photographic window into their daily world, you have to look at the stucco reliefs discovered at the Kubua site, dating roughly from 650 to 700.
The Kubua reliefs are a masterpiece of early Southeast Asian art. There is one specific panel that perfectly captures the vibrancy of their society. It depicts a trio of musicians in mid-performance.
It's an incredibly dynamic scene. On the right side of the relief, a musician is playing a complex five-stringed lute. The presence of a lute, which often has Central Asian or Indian origins, reinforces the reality of their vast trade networks.
Right.
In the center, another figure is depicted striking cymbals. And on the left, there is a musician playing a tube zither, which features this large, distinct gourd resonator attached to the instrument.
The artisan managed to capture movement, rhythm, and sound within a static medium. You can almost hear the music.
Yeah.
And the Kubua site yields much more than just musicians. The reliefs provide a cross-section of the entire social hierarchy. We see depictions of noble women adorned in jewelry with their attendants. We see soldiers clad in specific types of armor. We even see depictions of bound prisoners, reminding us of the martial reality of the era.
Think about the function of this art. We should consider these huge stone wheels of the law and the thousands of minted silver coins, not just as religious expressions, but as a form of ancient standardization. When a ruler commissions a Dharmakakra, or mints coins bearing Siddhi Dvaravati, they are broadcasting a shared identity.
It operates much like a shared currency zone or a standardized operating system in modern technology.
Exactly. It was a way of establishing a unified protocol. It communicated across hundreds of miles of decentralized territory, sending a clear message. We may live in different cities, governed by different princes who occasionally go to war with each other, but we participate in the same economic system. We recognize the same secret law.
The art and the religion were the mortar holding the bricks of the Dvaravati network together. But even the strongest cultural mortar eventually faces environmental and geopolitical pressures that it cannot withstand.
That's right.
By the time we reach the end of the first millennium, the prosperity and relative stability of this golden age met the harsh realities of changing regional dynamics.
This marks the beginning of the late Dvaravati decline, a period spanning the 9th to the 11th centuries. And it's crucial to understand the mechanics of this decline. It was not a sudden cataclysmic event.
No, not at all.
There was no single volcanic eruption that buried the cities, nor a single decisive battle that wiped them off the map in an afternoon.
No, the collapse of the Dvaravati network was a slow, agonizing process of overlapping pressures. The geopolitical climate of Southeast Asia was shifting drastically toward more centralized militaristic empires. The decentralized, peer-to-peer nature of Dvaravati, which had fueled their economic success for centuries, suddenly became a fatal vulnerability when faced with unified, expansionist neighbors.
Let's trace the timeline of these incursions, because the squeeze came from multiple directions. In the early 10th century, the pressure came from the south. The lower Menam Basin faced a sustained conquest by the kingdom of Tambralinga, led by a ruler named King Sujita.
Tambralinga was a powerful maritime state located on the Malay Peninsula. They recognized the strategic value of the Dvaravati trade routes. King Sujita's forces pushed north and reportedly seized the vital eastern center of Lavo in 927.
Right.
Losing Lavo was a devastating blow to the network's internal cohesion.
But the pressure from Tambralinga was just the beginning. Concurrently, you have the relentless, methodical expansion of the Khmer Angkorian Empire pushing in from the east. The Angkorian armies, highly organized and territorially ambitious, began annexing Dvaravati centers one by one.
The epigraphic records show that the Angkorian forces conquered the major center of Sithep in 946, during the reign of Rajendra II.
Wow, I mean, that's significant.
Yes, and Lavo, which had already suffered under the Tamberlinga conquest, was eventually absorbed completely into the Angkorian administrative sphere in 1005 during the reign of Suryavarman I.
So within a century, two of the greatest super-regional centers of the Dvaravati network, Sithep and Lavo, are swallowed entirely by a larger centralized empire. The Khmer didn't just conquer them, they imposed their own architectural styles and administrative systems, effectively erasing the political independence of those nodes.
These violent political shifts triggered enormous economic disruptions. The established trade routes that had funneled wealth into the Dvaravati cities were fundamentally rerouted by the new regional powers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Western centers like Muang Uthong faced severe economic contraction. The archaeological surveys of Uthong show a drastic drop in settlement density during this phase, leading to its eventual abandonment by the 12th century.
But Nakhon Pathom, the likely hub of the network, tried to survive by pivoting its strategy.
They did. Recognizing the loss of the overland routes and the eastern nodes, Nakhon Pathom attempted to link its remaining economy to the maritime prosperity of Srivijaya.
Which was the powerful thalassocracy rising to the south in the Indonesian archipelago.
Exactly. They found some measure of economic survival through this pivot, but their era of regional political dominance was completely over.
And then came the most devastating blow, this time from the west. The 11th century pagan incursions. The pagan kingdom, situated in present-day Myanmar, was rapidly expanding under the aggressive leadership of King Anarata.
Anarata's military campaigns were sweeping and brutal. His ambition was to consolidate control over the region's religious relics and secure access to the coastal trade ports.
Right.
The historical records strongly suggest that his expansion into the lower Menom Basin led to the severe depopulation and physical destruction of Nakhon Pathom around 1058.
The mechanics of how this pagan invasion was triggered are deeply complex. To understand the domino effect, we had to look at a specific military intervention from 1056. According to the Burmese chronicles, a martial group known as the Giwan warriors initiated a march against the kingdom of Thaton.
The identity of the Giwans is a subject of intense historical analysis. Scholars have proposed that they were descendants of the Taiwan, located in a southeastern territory they refer to as Ioja.
So you have the Giwans marching on Thaton. The problem is, Thaton is exactly the territory that King Anarata of Pagan is trying to annex for himself.
Right.
This intervention by the Giwans destabilizes the border region. It provides the exact spark, the political and military justification for Pagan to launch a sweeping retaliation. Anarata's forces crush Thaton and then continue their momentum eastward, expanding directly into the already weakened Dvaravati territories.
It's a perfect storm of external pressures. But what makes the collapse complete is that amid all this external invasion from Angkor in the east and Pagan in the west, the internal politics of the remaining central polities were still boiling over in spectacular fashion.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Let's look at the situation in Ayodhya.
The year is 1087. The ruler of Ayodhya, a king named Narai, dies prematurely. And crucially, he dies without producing a clear heir to the throne.
A sudden succession crisis in the middle of a multi-front regional collapse is the absolute worst-case scenario for a polity.
I can imagine.
The sources describe a bitter, protracted 2-year conflict that erupted internally. 9 different royal houses, each with their own factions and external backers, vied violently for the vacant throne of Ayodhya.
It is total internal chaos while empires are knocking down the gates. The conflict ultimately culminated in the victory of a figure known as Phra Chao Long. He managed to secure the throne, but the damage to the region's overall stability and economic infrastructure was profound.
So, as we transition out of the 11th century, the geopolitical map of Southeast Asia has been entirely redrawn. The classical Dvaravati centers have either suffered extensive depopulation and abandonment, like Uthong, or they have fallen under the direct, heavy-handed administration of the Angkorian and pagan empires.
The era of the decentralized, independent, moated cities sharing a peaceful artistic culture is completely dead. This brings us into the post-Dvaravati era, covering the 12th and 13th centuries. This is a highly transitional, deeply fragmented phase. The old power centers are gone, and the gravity of influence shifts geographically.
We observe a noticeable migration of political activity toward the Mekong River Basin. A prime example of this shift is the site of Muang Sing. If you examine the ruins of Muang Sing today, You don't see the classic Dvaravati stucco art or the large stone wheels of the law.
What do you see?
You see heavy, undeniable Angkorian Bayon-style architectural influence.
It's visual archaeological proof of who was holding the reins of power. The Khmer Empire was stamping its aesthetic and administrative authority onto the landscape, but Kakar's control was stretched thin and it was not absolute.
Right.
Out of this regional fragmentation, we begin to trace the emergence of the early Siamese polities.
The ruling lineages that had survived the collapse of Dvaravati were highly mobile. We see continuous northward and southward relocations as these elite families sought secure footing and defensible terrain. Over decades, they began establishing new, independent centers of power at strategic locations like Kamphaeng Phet, Sukhothai, and Cheliang.
And crucially, we see the formation and consolidation of Ayodhya in the central Manam Valley. Around the 1180s and 1190s, the region began to stabilize and consolidate once again. And what's vital to understand is the mechanism they used to rebuild that power.
They utilized the oldest strategy in the Dvaravati playbook, complex dynastic marriage.
Precisely. In 1205, a ruler named Uthong II claimed the throne of Ayodhya, and his lineage was a remarkably cosmopolitan amalgamation.
Right.
The records indicate his heritage incorporated Mon, Chinese, Cham, and Siamese bloodlines. To reinforce his precarious position, he married directly into the Mon ruling house of Haripunjaya to the north, while simultaneously establishing secure alliances with the Khmer-influenced Lavo to the east.
He was weaving the fragmented pieces of the region back together through strategic alliances. What's fascinating here is how the legacy of the fallen Dvaravati network was purposefully and intentionally preserved by these new Siamese monarchs.
Yeah.
They didn't attempt to erase the past or distance themselves from the defeated cities. They actively co-opted the ancient identity.
This strategy becomes undeniably clear when we look at the year 1351. This is the year traditionally cited for the official foundation of the Ayodhya kingdom by a powerful ruler named Ramathibodi I. Through military skill and diplomacy, he managed to unify the four major centers of the lower river valleys into a single, highly centralized new state.
He creates a new empire. But when he officially names his newly constructed capital city, he doesn't just call it Ayutthaya.
Right.
The full, highly formal ceremonial name is recorded as Krungthep Dvaravati Sri Ayutthaya.
Think about the profound significance of that choice. You have a newly minted 14th century empire. They possess a standing army, centralized administration, and undeniable regional power. Why on earth would they invoke a 6th century decentralized cultural network in their official state title?
It is a deliberate calculation of legitimacy.
It's exactly like a modern corporate merger or a high-stakes branding strategy. Imagine a vast new technology conglomerate forms today through hostile takeovers. But they decide to keep the name of a highly respected, century-old legacy company in their official title.
They want that recognition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are doing it specifically to borrow that established prestige. They want the immediate trust and legitimacy that comes with the old name. Ramathibodi I was essentially broadcasting a message to the entire region. We possess the new military power, but we carry the ancient sacred authority of Dvaravati. We are the legitimate heirs to the Golden Age.
And that historical memory proved to be incredibly stubborn. It persisted, morphed, and retained its power over 1,000 years of continuous warfare and shifting borders. We have a remarkable artifact that proves this. A bronze cannon, acquired by Burmese forces after the devastating second fall of Ayutthaya in 1767.
There is an inscription carved into this cannon, dated to 1768, belonging to the victorious Burmese king, Hishinbushin of Ava. And in detailing his absolute conquest and the destruction of the Siamese capital, the inscription refers to the defeated city of Ayutthaya simply as Dvaravati.
1768. A full millennium after the artisans at Kubua were molding stucco musicians, and centuries after the moats of Uthong dried up, the conquerors are still utilizing that name to define their ultimate prize. The echo of those early Mon principalities, of those peaceful trading nodes, was still ringing clearly across the battlefields of the 18th century.
Which leads us with a concept we haven't deeply covered, but one that is essential to ponder as we conclude. When does a civilization actually fall?
Right.
By the traditional rigid metrics of history, the Dvaravati network failed. Their network was fractured, their primary cities were abandoned to the jungle or conquered by empires, and they didn't leave behind an unbroken line of universally recognized emperors.
If you look strictly at political sovereignty, they fell in the 11th century beneath the weight of Angkor and Pagan. But look at the mechanics of what actually survived. Their architectural concept of the moat permanently defined the urban landscape of Southeast Asia for centuries. Their artistic interpretation of the wheels of the law permanently defined the region's religious iconography.
Their very name, Dvaravati, that which has gates, became the absolute bedrock upon which the subsequent Siamese kingdoms built their political legitimacy. It makes you consider how much of the new political structures, the newly proclaimed empires and states in our own modern world, are actually just ancient cultural networks wearing a different name. The political entity dies, but the cultural operating system survives.
It turns out, when you look closely enough at the origins of states, those muddy waters of history aren't just murky. They are incredibly deep, they are highly complex, and the cultural currents from 1,000 years ago are still moving powerfully beneath the surface today.
Thank you for listening. History Maps. Learn history visually.